So, Warhammer has a lot, and I mean a lot of cool models, but some are more iconic than others. When someone says Warhammer, certain minis will come to mind, and I'm not going to say the ones I'm thinking of right now because that's what this video is for. Because God Emperor knows I need to make a simple and fun video as of late. And what better way than to make a top 10 that totally won't cause a storm in the comments down below. So let's talk about it. But welcome back everyone, it's me the Warhammer complaining guy, Revan/Handy, destroy all wallets, and maker of terrible financial decisions. So first, a disclaimer. This isn't the end-all be-all list. This is just my opinion based upon what minis pop into my head when I think Warhammer. You might agree or disagree on the placement of some minis or the absence of some minis. So why don't you leave your top 10 iconic minis in the comments down below after you finish watching the video, and you've done your part by doing all that good YouTube stuff like subscribing to the channel and liking the video for the almighty YouTube algorithm. Or you can argue about it in my Discord or yell at me when I stream. One more thing, I don't own all the minis in this list, so I asked my Discord for some help, so I'm using some photos of their minis for this video. Anyways, first we have Space Marines, both Loyalist and Chaos. So when you think Warhammer, what comes to mind? Well, probably the poster boys of Warhammer, a Space Marine, Loyalist, or Chaos, because these guys literally keep the lights on. Also, yes, I know this isn't one mini, but hopefully you get the point I'm making. Space Marines are in every piece of Warhammer media for advertisements. Wherever you go, you cannot escape the Space Marines. Oh hey, it's time for the reveal show. Here's your equal participation cake, Space Marines. Space Marines are what makes Warhammer, well, Warhammer. Everyone at some point is gonna have Space Marines, Chaos, or Loyalist, but if I were to choose one specific Space Marine mini for this list, it would be the Primaris Lieutenant because, my god, there are so many of them. It's not even funny. How do I know? Because me and my friend Matt literally made a Primaris Lieutenant tier list years ago. But a Space Marine is the quintessential iconic mini of Warhammer, but it's not number one for obvious reasons because then this list would be boring and no fun at all. So next we have Knights and or Titans. It was hard to separate the two because, fun fact, when Knights were first introduced they were actually called Knight Titans. So for the sake of consistency, when I say Titans, just know I'm also including Knights. But Titans are the kings of the battlefield, excluding tabletop to some degree. When someone thinks Warhammer, the Titans will usually pop into their head, because Titans bring this epic sense of scale to Warhammer, often expressed through the many pieces of art GW has put out over the decades. Even though GW can't even make their height consistent across the novels, this, I refuse to believe an Emperor Titan is only as big as the Statue of Liberty. There are many Titan models in Warhammer. You have of course the Knight Titans, Warhounds, Reavers, the Warbringer, and of course the Warlord Titan. Also, stop asking. Titans are really cool bigatures, but are unfortunately some of the most expensive ones currently available. 1, because they're some of the largest models you can own. 2, because Forge World. And 3, GW says F you, that's why. But when I hear someone say Warhammer, Titans are usually what comes to mind. Well, at least for me, for obvious reasons. But up next is the largest tank in Warhammer. The Baneblade! The Baneblade and all of its variants are quintessential Warhammer. You have a giant f***off tank with giant guns, sometimes Titan-sized guns, with multiple variants that just scream, now that's from Warhammer. While the Baneblade isn't purely a Space Marine model, the Baneblade has its own special place among the Warhammer fandom, because it's this big f***off hunk of plastic land battleship that can hit like a truck. A Baneblade is the centerpiece model of centerpiece models for Imperial Guard, no matter which variant. The Baneblade, like a lot of Guard models, is also popular among the armor modelers even though it's $185. It also has a special place in almost every Warhammer fan's hearts if they play the Dawn of War series. It is the Baneblade! Just this one line on its own has cemented the Baneblade into everyone's minds just because of the goofy delivery. Honestly, I think at some point, no matter which army everyone has, we all say to ourselves, you know what? I think I want a Baneblade! But what's a Baneblade without its Space Marine sort of equivalent that isn't thrown into Legends? That's right, I'm talking about the good old Land Raider, discovered by Arkham Land, and no, I'm not kidding by the way. The Land Raider is one of the Space Marine tanks, ooh, foreshadowing. It's one of those Space Marine vehicles every Space Marine player needs to have at some point if we ignore the affront to God that is the Gladiator hover tanks. The Land Raider's been around since the beginning of Warhammer, or Rogue Trader as it was called back in the day, and the plastic kit we're most familiar with has been around for about 25 years as of this year. so it's been a vital part of Warhammer since it started to pick up steam in the early 2000s, which makes it one of the most iconic miniatures of 40k because it was also one of the largest plastic kits GW produced at the time. The Land Raider has had many variants over the years, both Forge World and plastic, along with the rare one I own, which is Legends. But next we have the chunkiest of Space Marines, Terminators. I feel like Terminators, along with the general Space Marines, are an iconic part of Warhammer's history, because like the Land Raider, Terminators have been around since the Rogue Trader era, along with the board game I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with or have heard about called Space Hulk, which was later also turned into a video game called Space Hulk Deathwing. I myself have a metric ton of Terminators, with even more on the way once the Assault Terminators are sold separately. Maybe. There are also multiple armor variants of Terminators for Space Marines, like the Indominus pattern we're all familiar with. Then we have the Cataphracti, Gorgon, Tartarus, Aegis, and Saturnine Terminator armor, along with the various Chaos and Custodes Terminators. But Terminators are an iconic Warhammer miniature that we all know and love because as the years went on and everything was getting Primaris, unfortunately, we all hoped for new in-scale Terminators, and it finally happened in 10th edition. Except for, of course, Grey Knights. But what do Titans, Terminators, Baneblades, and Land Raiders all have in common? Well, if you want to save money, you can magnetize all the weapons, and you know what else uses magnets? The sponsor of this video, Tabletop Stronghold. Tabletop Stronghold is your one-stop shop for both miniature carrying cases and terrain. If you want any of the iconic minis in this list to be safe when you go to the game store, you can be sure that the Mag Case 2.0 will protect your minis and gets the job done. But Ribbon/Handy, whichever you prefer. I have a Horde army and an army that consists of multiple large models. Well, worry not, viewer. It comes in multiple sizes, so no matter what army size you have, it'll fit in one of these cases. It also has adjustable metal trays that'll secure your minis using the power of magnets that have been blessed by the all-powerful Magnet Wizard. Because I bought this overpriced plastic, so I'm getting my money's worth, God Emperor, damn it. I myself own the Mag Case 2.0 Mini, which is perfect for any hyper elite army that doesn't involve oversized chunks of plastic or resin for obvious reasons. So no matter which mag case size you get, you can be assured that your army will be safe and secure. Also, if you want to be a massive help to the channel, use my link in the pinned comment or description and use code CRAFT25 for 25% off your next order. So thank you Tabletop Stronghold for sponsoring this video. If you want some terrain or a Mag Case 2.0 that ships to pretty much anywhere in the world for free, go to tabletopstronghold.com. So Space Marines, Titans, Baneblades, Land Raiders, and Terminators, oh my. What could possibly be in the top 5 for most iconic Warhammer miniatures? Well, this is where we get controversial, even though this list is already controversial since it's some random guy on the internet's opinion. Okay, up next we have the one thing a lot of us like to shout besides is blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. That's right, I'm talking about Khorne Berserkers. These guys are some of the most recognizable Chaos Space Marines in Warhammer because, well, blood for the blood god! Yeah. Khorne Berserkers are some of the earliest Warhammer miniatures ever made, although back then they were not called that, they were just called Chaos Renegades up until 1994 with the first plastic kit, which came in a squad of 10 called World Eaters Chaos Space Marines, and then in 1998 Berserkers got a new multi-part plastic kit and became what we know today as Khorne Berserkers. These kits were of course sold for over 20 years before they got their newer updated models with the release of the World Eaters Codex. Although the kits may have changed, they still retain the iconic look that Khorne Berserkers are known for, the large pointy helmets, a pistol, and various chain swords and axes. Next on the iconic miniatures list is Orcs, more specifically the Orc Boys. You could say that any of the old classic Orc miniatures are iconic before they all eventually get updated because we all know what's coming at some point, but to me it's Orc Boys. Why? Because when I think of orcs, I always think of the Orc Boys from the Dawn of War 2 trailer back in the day with their goofy proportions and wacky looking faces. Then for the mini, it's of course the goofy pose of them according to a funny comment I found on Reddit, throwing it back for Gork or Mork. Orc Boys are one of the core units of orcs, so of course in an orcs list there would be loads of boys ready to crump some umis ready for that good fight. But these minis radiate Warhammer since they embody the goofy side of Warhammer we've all come to love. Because with all the factions in Warhammer being so serious, it's nice to see that there's a somewhat goofy side to the setting. Which is also why orc players are usually some of the most fun Warhammer players to play against, because like the army, they make the game more enjoyable even if your army's face is getting smashed in. But next up is the top 3 most iconic Warhammer miniatures. But first, some honorable mentions. These are minis I feel needed to be mentioned, even if I couldn't find a place for them on the list. First is the Sisters of Battle Squad. These are in a lot of iconic Warhammer art, so they're iconic, but only if you're familiar with the setting. After Sisters are Inquisitors, although I can't really think of an iconic one besides maybe Greyfax or Inquisitor Kamarasov, but he's Legends, and for me it's honestly the Monkeys. Then we have Chaplains. I mean, come on, they scream Warhammer. Skulls, Purity Seals, and Big Bonk Stick. What's not to love? After the Skull Bros, this one is iconic for all the wrong reasons. It's the Grey Knight's Dread Knight, and I don't think I need to explain any further. Then finally is the Land Speeder. This one has its roots with the Deodorant Stick Land Speeder, which later became multiple variants of different models that some of us have at least one of. But now it's time for the top 3 most iconic Warhammer models, with number 3 being the Eldar Falcon or Wave Serpent. This is the original hover tank that doesn't look like an affront to God. Although by today's standards, the original Armor Cast one might be to some. It's a very nicely designed and iconic tank from all the way back in 1997, and yes, this model kit is that fucking old. As someone who likes vehicle models, the Wave Serpent / Falcon holds a special place in my heart, even though I hate those damn knife-eared bastards. Because when I was younger, the game store in California that sadly closed down before I ever got into Warhammer had some very nicely painted Wave Serpents or Falcons in a display case, and I thought they were really fucking cool. Little did I know years later that same kit hasn't really changed at all if we exclude all the Forge World variants that are no longer for sale. But I feel like this is one of those models that has withstood the test of time because whoever designed it did such a great job that it still holds up 28 years later. Okay, so number 2 was way too tough to decide, so I'm making it a twofer, because in my mind, the Leman Russ and Rhino are equal in terms when it comes to how iconic to Warhammer these minis are, because you can't have the Space Marines without a Rhino, and you can't have a Guard Army without a Leman Russ. Okay, you can, but I think you know what I mean. These two models are so entwined into the history of Warhammer because they've been around pretty much since the beginning of what we know as Warhammer was 2nd edition, with the first plastic Leman Russ being released in 1995 and the very first Rhino kit being made in 1988, along with all the variants that the models are a base for. Like the Falcon, these two minis were the premier tanks of Space Marines and Guard at the time. Now it's the Land Raider and Baneblade, but you get where I'm going with this. But these two minis are on equal grounds when it comes to how iconic they are, solely because of the mark they've left on Warhammer as a whole, but not as much as the next mini. What, you guys thought I forgot about the almighty Box Knot? Well, to me, this is one of the most iconic Warhammer miniatures, no matter how much GW wants to forget about it and replace it with the Redemptor chassis. Ugh. The Box Knot has been in multiple forms of Warhammer media, be it the video games, art, animations, you name it, it's been in it. Every chapter at some point also might have had its own special dreadnought like the multiple Blood Angels Box Knots, Space Wolves, Salamanders, etc, etc. I have 3 of these Box Knots, the Chaplain Dreadnought, Bjorn Bjornsson, and the Death Company Dreadnought, because I wanted a piece of Warhammer history before they got phased out completely. I don't know why, but for some reason, as old as the design is, it still holds up today against the newer miniatures, although I wish GW just made a larger version instead of the Primaris Dreadnoughts. But I do like all the other Horus Heresy and Custodes Dreadnought patterns, so I guess they get a pass. This simple little box on legs made painting easy for a lot of people because there's not many complicated shapes that need to be highlighted, and it had plenty of real estate at the time for freehanding or the eventual water transfers. And as the years go on, I'm sure GW will eventually stop making them, but to me, the Box Knot has rightfully earned the title as the most iconic Warhammer miniature ever made. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, and a huge thank you to the Gigas of the Chads right here, the channel members and Twitch subscribers. So if you too want to be a Giga Chad and help fund these stupid ventures, consider becoming a member of either for access to the member section of the Discord and other things. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, but I have to go make more terrible financial decisions, so I'll see you all in the next video, and remember, when you play Warhammer, being poor is a choice.